Hey everyone, just a quick reminder. Only about 25% of you watching are subscribed to the channel. If you're enjoying the content, hitting that subscribe button would really help the channel grow. And while you're at it, smash that like button too. It helps a ton, and lets me know you're enjoying the content. Thanks for being here, and let's dive into the story. I don't know why I took the night shift security job at Yankee Stadium. Maybe it was the pay, or maybe I just wanted to stand where legends once played. I should have known something was off when my supervisor, a grizzled old man named Randy, handed me a small folded paper on my first night. "You'll need this," he muttered, shoving it into my palm. His eyes darted over my shoulder like he was afraid of being overheard. I smirked. "What's this? A list of ghost rules or something?" Randy didn't laugh. "They're not jokes, kid. Follow these and you'll get through the night." I unfolded the paper, my stomach tightening as I read, "Rules for the Yankee Stadium night shift. If you hear the crack of a bat, even though the stadium is empty, do not investigate. Do not respond to cheers. The retired numbers hanging above the field. Sometimes one disappears. If you notice a missing number, look away and count to 30. It will return. If you hear footsteps behind you in Monument Park, do not turn around. Keep walking. If they get closer, whisper, 'This is your field, not mine.' Then leave immediately. At exactly 3:01 a.m., check home plate. If there are fresh cleat marks, wipe them away. If you see footprints leading away, lock the clubhouse and stay out until sunrise. Never, ever say Babe Ruth's name after midnight. He doesn't like being spoken about when the stadium is empty." I chuckled nervously. "You can't be serious." Randy grabbed my arm, his grip like iron. "I am serious, kid. You break a rule, you don't finish the shift. Understand?" I nodded, shoving the list into my pocket. It was just a silly tradition, right? Something to scare rookies? But as I started my rounds through the dimly lit concourses, an uneasy feeling settled in my chest. The stadium, usually alive with roaring crowds and flashing lights, felt dead, a tomb of concrete and steel. Every step echoed, bouncing off empty seats. The banners fluttered slightly, though there was no breeze. Then, just past Monument Park, I heard it. The crack of a bat. My blood ran cold. The field was empty. Then came the sound of cheering. Distant, faint, like an old recording. I swallowed hard, gripping my flashlight. I wasn't supposed to investigate. I wasn't supposed to respond. But I had to know. Slowly, I stepped onto the field, and that's when I saw it. A shadow standing at home plate. Tall, broad-shouldered, a baseball bat resting on his shoulder. The hairs on my arms stood straight up. Then, ever so slightly, he turned his head toward me. I froze. The shadowed figure at home plate tilted his head, like he knew I was watching. My breath hitched. The rule explicitly said not to investigate the sound of a bat cracking. Yet here I was, staring at what should have been an empty field. The air around me felt thicker, like the weight of thousands of unseen eyes pressing down. Then the floodlights flickered, and the shadow vanished. I sucked in a shaky breath, my pulse hammering. Maybe my mind was playing tricks on me. Maybe Randy just got in my head with that stupid list. Yeah, that was it. I turned on my heel and booked it out of the field, wiping the sweat off my palms. But as I passed the retired numbers above the dugout, I nearly tripped over my own feet. One was missing. Number 3, Babe Ruth's number, was gone. I swallowed hard. Look away. Count to 30. I squeezed my eyes shut and whispered under my breath, 1, 2, 3. Somewhere in the distance, I swore I heard faint laughter. My breath hitched. Just keep counting. 29, 30. I snapped my eyes open. The number was back. I exhaled sharply, my knees weak. Okay, that was rule number 2. 2 weird things in the span of an hour. That was enough for one night. I checked my watch. 3 a.m. My stomach dropped. Rule 4. Check home plate. If there are fresh cleat marks, wipe them away. I turned, squinting toward the infield. A set of footprints trailed from home plate toward the dugout. Cleat marks. Fresh ones. I was not about to be the dumb horror movie guy who ignored the rules, so I moved fast. My boots scuffed against the dirt as I swiped my sleeve over the footprints, erasing every mark until the dirt looked untouched. Then I ran to the clubhouse and locked the doors. My heart pounded against my ribs. Was this real? Some kind of stadium prank? Was Randy screwing with me? I dug out my phone to text him, but as I did, something scratched against the outside of the door. A long, slow, dragging sound, like someone was dragging a bat across the concrete. I held my breath. Then a voice whispered through the door. "You didn't wipe them all." My blood turned to ice. The door rattled, once, twice, before the sound of footsteps retreated down the hall. I didn't move, didn't breathe. When I finally worked up the courage to check, I peeked under the crack of the door. The hallway was empty, but in the dirt outside the clubhouse, a single cleat print remained. I hadn't wiped them all, and whoever, or whatever, had left them was coming back. I didn't sleep the next day. When the sun came up, I drove home, locked my doors, and sat on my couch in complete silence. I kept telling myself I was tired, that my mind had played tricks on me, but deep down, I knew. I knew what I saw. By the time my second shift rolled around, I seriously considered quitting, but I needed the money, so like an idiot, I went back. Randy was waiting for me by the entrance, arms crossed. His face was pale. "You look like hell, kid," he muttered. I scoffed. "Thanks. That's supposed to make me feel better?" He didn't laugh. "Did you follow the rules?" I hesitated. His eyes darkened. "You missed one, didn't you?" My throat was dry. "Yeah. I thought I got all the cleat marks, but I missed one." Randy let out a slow breath. "Damn it." His reaction made my stomach turn. "Why? What happens now?" He looked around like someone was listening, then lowered his voice. "You've been noticed." My chest tightened. "By who?" Randy clenched his jaw. "Not who. What?" He reached into his pocket and shoved something into my hand, a piece of chalk. "You're on your own tonight. If you hear anything, you draw a circle around yourself and stay inside it. No matter what happens, do not step out." I stared at him. "This is a joke, right?" He didn't answer, just turned and walked away. I was alone. By 2:30 a.m., the stadium was completely silent. Too silent. I kept my head down, focusing on my rounds. I checked the retired numbers, all there. Monument Park, no phantom footsteps. For a while I thought maybe, just maybe, I'd be okay. Then I heard it, the sound of cheering. It rolled through the empty stadium like a distant wave. I gritted my teeth. Don't investigate. Don't respond. I turned away, forcing myself to keep walking. Then, a voice whispered behind me, "You missed a spot." Cold air rushed down my spine. I spun around. No one was there, but my eyes landed on the field, and I felt my stomach drop. There were footprints again. They trailed from home plate to the dugout, deep and fresh in the dirt. I reached for my radio, but my hands were shaking too hard to press the button. Then I heard it. A slow, dragging sound, like a bat being pulled across the concrete, coming from inside the dugout. My breath hitched. Then a figure stepped out of the shadows. He was tall. His pinstriped uniform faded and stained with dirt. The number on his back was too smudged to read. He lifted the bat onto his shoulder and turned to face me. But where his eyes should have been, there was nothing. A black, empty void. He grinned, then took a step toward me. I moved fast. My fingers scrambled to uncap the chalk Randy had given me. I bent down and drew a circle around myself in the dirt. The second I closed the loop, the figure stopped. The grin faded from his face. He tilted his head as if he was waiting. the crowd noise vanished. The stadium was deathly silent. Then, he whispered, "See you tomorrow." And in the blink of an eye, he was gone. I didn't move, didn't breathe. The second my shift was over, I ran to my car, peeling out of the lot like my life depended on it, because I had the sickening feeling it did. I called in sick the next night and the next, but on the third night my phone rang. Unknown caller. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something told me to answer. The second I picked up, a familiar voice rasped through the speaker. "You can't run forever, kid." My stomach flipped. "Randy?" A long pause. Then, click. I stared at the phone. Randy never called anyone. He didn't even have a cell. I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw him, the faceless man in the pinstriped uniform, standing at home plate, waiting. By sunset, I made a decision. I had to go back. The stadium felt different when I stepped inside. Colder, like it had been expecting me. I made my way to the security office, but Randy wasn't there. His chair was empty. His radio sat untouched on the desk. I tried calling him, straight to voicemail. Something wasn't right. I took a shaky breath and pulled the rules list from my pocket. Rule 5 haunted me the most. Never say Babe Ruth's name after midnight. Why? What would happen? I shouldn't have been curious. But after everything I'd seen, I had to know. 12:01 a.m. I gripped my flashlight and whispered, "Babe Ruth." The second the words left my mouth, the temperature plunged. Somewhere deep in the belly of the stadium, a door slammed. The air grew heavy. Wrong. Then I heard it. Footsteps. Heavy, deliberate footsteps. Coming from the concourse, getting closer. I backed away from the security office, my heartbeat hammering. The footsteps didn't stop. Then, just ahead, a figure emerged. A hulking shadow in a pinstriped jersey. My chest tightened. His face was hidden beneath a ragged baseball cap. But I knew who it was. My throat went dry. "Babe?" The air split open as an ungodly roar echoed through the stadium. The floodlights exploded overhead. I ran, down the concourse, past the empty concession stands. The footsteps pounded behind me, impossibly fast, closing in. I rounded the corner into Monument Park, heart in my throat, and skidded to a stop. The statues of past Yankees had moved. They all faced me now. I swallowed back a scream. Then, a whisper curled through the air. "This is our field." The ground shook, the floodlights flickered, and behind me, the footsteps stopped. I turned. The faceless man from before stood inches away. But this time, he wasn't alone. Behind him, rows of shadowed figures stretched across the field. Dozens of them. Old players, dead players, watching me, waiting. The faceless man leaned close, his voice a low hiss. "Run!" I ran. I didn't look back. Didn't stop to think. Didn't stop to breathe. I just ran, tearing through Monument Park, past the silent statues of Yankees legends whose eyes now seemed to follow me. The air swirled, thick with whispers. A crowd that wasn't there, chanting, roaring, like I was in the middle of a sold-out game. But there was no one. No one alive, anyway. The faceless man's voice echoed through the stadium. "This is our field." I stumbled toward the dugout, heart hammering, my legs weak beneath me. If I could just make it to the exits. Then, suddenly, everything stopped. The crowd noise, the pounding footsteps, silence. I turned. The shadowed players still stood on the field, motionless, watching. At home plate, the faceless man had raised his bat. I swallowed. This wasn't over. He was waiting for something. Then I remembered. The rule about home plate. At exactly 3:01 a.m., check home plate. If there are fresh cleat marks, wipe them away. I fumbled for my phone. 2:59 a.m. I had 1 minute. Shaking, I forced my feet to move, stepping onto the field, onto the sacred ground where legends had played. The second my foot touched the dirt, they moved. The crowd in the stands reappeared. Thousands of ghostly figures filled the seats, their faces blurred, shifting, some grinning, some hollow-eyed. The dead were watching. I forced myself to look at home plate. Fresh cleat marks, deep imprints in the dirt. The faceless man gripped his bat tighter. If I didn't wipe them away before 3:01, I had a feeling I'd be playing this game forever. I dropped to my knees and wiped the dirt with my hands, erasing the prints. As I did, the faceless man slowly lowered his bat. The ghostly players faded. The crowd vanished. The floodlights dimmed. And then, I was alone. Just an empty stadium. Silent. I checked my phone. 3 a.m. I let out a shaky breath. I had followed the rules, and I was still here. The next morning I quit. Randy never came back. His locker was emptied. No one in management knew where he'd gone. Or maybe they did, and they just wouldn't say. I still dream about that night. The faceless man, the ghostly crowd. And sometimes when I watch a Yankees game, I think I see something in the dugout. A shadow, standing where no one should be. Still waiting for me to come back. I never will. Because Yankee Stadium belongs to the dead, and I was just passing through. It's been 6 months since I left Yankee Stadium. I haven't been back. Haven't even driven past it. I tell myself I moved on. That what happened was just some trick of my imagination. A mix of exhaustion and paranoia. But deep down, I know better. The ghosts of Yankee Stadium are real, and they aren't done with me. It started 2 weeks ago. An unknown number called me in the middle of the night. I let it go to voicemail. When I listened the next morning, the message was nothing but static. Except, just beneath the white noise, I swear I heard something. The crack of a bat. I blocked the number. That same day, I got a package in the mail. No return address, no name. Just a plain cardboard box with my name scrawled across the top. Inside was a baseball. A dirty, scuffed-up baseball that reeked of old leather and sweat, and etched into the surface clear as day. You missed a spot. My hands went ice cold. I slammed the box shut and tossed it in the dumpster outside my apartment. That night I had a dream. I was back at Yankee Stadium. The seats were filled, packed with a roaring crowd, but no one had a face, just smooth, featureless skin. I stood at home plate, holding a bat. The faceless man was the pitcher. He wound up, threw a fastball. I didn't move. The ball screamed through the air, straight for my head. I jolted awake, drenched in sweat. I checked the clock. 3:01 a.m. And outside my window, in the dim glow of the streetlights, a baseball sat on my porch. The same one I threw away. I drove to a bar that night, ordered a double whiskey, and tried to convince myself I wasn't losing my mind. Then, someone sat next to me. An old man, wrinkled and weathered, wearing a faded Yankees cap. He didn't look at me, just took a sip of his drink and muttered, "You saw them, didn't you?" My heart skipped. What? He turned his head slightly. His eyes were cloudy, distant. "I used to work there too," he said, voice low. "Back in the 80s. Saw the same things you did." My fingers clenched around my glass. "Then you know how to stop it?" The old man let out a dry chuckle. "You don't stop it. They don't let you go." A chill slithered down my spine. "Then what do I do?" I whispered. He finally looked at me. His eyes were glassy, almost empty. "There's one last rule," he said. My breath caught. "The final rule." The bar suddenly felt too quiet, the air around me too heavy. His voice dropped lower. "If they come for you, play the game." A lump formed in my throat. "And if I don't?" The old man's expression darkened. "Then you'll never leave the field." I didn't sleep that night. Didn't even try. By morning, I had made a decision. I needed to go back. Not for closure, not for answers. To finish the game. I drove to the stadium as the sun set, my stomach twisted in knots. It was empty. No games, no crowds, just the ghosts. I walked through the familiar halls, my footsteps echoing against the concrete. Made my way to the dugout. And there, sitting on home plate, a bat, a glove, a single baseball. I swallowed hard. The whisper came immediately. Batter up. I didn't run, didn't hesitate. I picked up the bat, stepped into the batter's box, took my stance, and as the faceless man rose from the shadows, the floodlights roared to life. The crowd cheered. The game had begun.